The twin suns of Terran 9 had dipped below the jagged horizon, leaving Carrot City wrapped in sharp shadows and cold wind. Metal buildings groaned under years of neglect. Dust from the canyon cliffs swirled through the empty streets. Malcolm Vey tightened his jacket, shivering as he climbed the rusted stairs to the top of the communication tower. His hands, calloused from years of repairs and survival, gripped the fractured metal railing. He could see the faint glimmer of distant storms, the plasma clouds that rolled across the northern cliffs, flashes of violet fire against the darkening sky. He hated nights like this. The nights where silence pressed against the city, thick and heavy, and every shadow could hide danger. Humans had survived here for decades, but Carrot was dying. Supplies ran low, the gravity shields that protected the city wavered, and no one answered the distress signals he had patched together. It was as if the universe had forgotten them. And yet Malcolm kept going. He had to. Someone had to. In the cramped lab below, wires snaked across the floor, humming with barely controlled power. He adjusted a panel, checked the voltage, tapped a circuit, and the faint green glow of life returned to a blinking console. It was a small victory, but in a city like Carrot, small victories mattered. Every extra moment of communication, every working light could mean survival. A sudden vibration ran through the tower. Malcolm froze. It wasn't from the wind. Not from the distant plasma storms. Something heavy, deliberate. A knock. One slow and resonant. The kind of knock that made the metal under his hands hum with shockwaves. His heart jumped. He wasn't afraid, not exactly, but every nerve in his body tightened. He scanned the canyon below through his viewport. Darkness. Nothing moved. The knock came again, louder, and he realized it was coming from the lower doors of his lab, the main entrance. Whoever, or whatever, it was big. Too big for any human. Malcolm's mind raced. Carrot had no visitors anymore. Traders had stopped coming years ago. Raiders sometimes prowled the canyon, but their weapons made different noises. This was different. His fingers itched toward the laser cutter on the wall, the emergency flare gun at his side. But something in him, a stubborn, reckless part, urged him forward. He climbed down the spiral stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering. Shadows pooled around the metal doorway. Then he saw it. Through the frosted window, a massive silhouette blocked the canyon light. The shape was unlike anything human. Scales shimmered faintly even in the gloom, too large to be mistaken for any animal. 2 eyes, bright and sharp, reflected the last traces of sun, burning with a strange mix of anger and sorrow. The door vibrated under another knock. Malcolm took a deep breath. Fear and curiosity tangled in his chest, but he reminded himself, humans survived here because we dared. Because we faced things we didn't understand. He grabbed the handle. His knuckles whitened. The shadow shifted slightly, revealing a hint of wings, folded but immense. He could feel it, some intelligence behind the eyes. A presence, a weight, pressing into the room without entering. Not a predator hunting him. Not exactly. But an awareness that demanded attention. What are you? Malcolm whispered. His voice barely carried over the hum of the dying city. There was no answer, at least not in words. Then came the sensation, sharp, impossible, in his mind rather than his ears. A thought pressed against his own. The gates are closed. I need you. Malcolm staggered back, blinking. This was impossible. Nothing should speak directly into the mind. Yet the urgency, the need, the authority behind it, burned in him like fire. He knew somehow that ignoring it would bring disaster. His fingers loosened on the door handle. For a moment, every logical thought screamed at him to lock the door, to barricade himself, to run. But then he felt it, the desperation behind the presence. Not cruelty. Not hunger. A king without a kingdom, seeking help in a world that had forgotten him. Malcolm swallowed hard. Sweat ran down his neck. He thought of Carrot, fragile and defenseless, the people who counted on him even when no one else cared. He thought of all the impossible odds he had survived already, storms, supply failures, raiders, deadly technology left behind by vanished civilizations. Then, almost without thinking, he did it. He turned the handle and opened the door. The massive figure stepped forward, filling the doorway, wings brushing the walls, eyes locked on him. The air seemed to pulse with power, old and raw, and for a moment Malcolm thought the floor would shake apart beneath them. But he didn't step back. He squared his shoulders. Humans survived because we faced what we could not understand. Because we dared. The shadow of the figure stretched across the lab. Its voice, or its thought, rippled in his mind again, slower this time, like a giant exhale. I was lost. Now perhaps I am found. Malcolm's heart pounded, but he did not retreat. He simply nodded. And then he realized. This night, the night that should have been ordinary, had changed everything. The city, the canyon, even his own life. It was all about to be tested in ways no human had ever imagined. A low rumble echoed from beyond the cliffs. Malcolm glanced out the viewport. Something moved in the northern darkness, more than one shape. And now he understood the stakes. Opening the door was not a choice anymore. It was the first move in a game that could decide the fate of Carrot, and perhaps all of Terra 9. Malcolm stepped back as the massive figure entered the lab, the metal floor groaning under its weight. The room seemed impossibly small now, filled with scales that shimmered like molten silver and wings that brushed the ceiling. The dragon's eyes, sharp and ancient, studied him. It was not a mindless beast, not an animal seeking prey. There was intelligence there, memory and loss. I am Theryx. The thought came into Malcolm's mind, stronger this time. Theryx, the dethroned king. Malcolm blinked. Words formed in his mind without sound. King. What do you mean? The dragon's presence pressed on him again, like the weight of history. I ruled orbiting worlds, planets under my protection, until betrayal and war cast me out. I am hunted. I cannot fight them alone. Malcolm swallowed hard, trying to process it. An exiled dragon king hunted by unknown forces, standing in his tiny lab. Carrot was already in danger, the city fragile, its defenses weak. And now this creature, enormous and powerful, sought his help. His chest tightened. He was just one human. What could he do? Yet, in that moment he felt something familiar. Humans survive because we were clever. Because when faced with impossible odds, we adapted. He nodded slowly. Then we fight together, he said aloud, though he knew the dragon did not hear words in the normal way. We fight together, he repeated in his mind, hoping Theryx could sense his resolve. The dragon's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. It stepped closer, careful not to crush the workbenches or the scattered tools. You are unafraid, Theryx's thought came, tinged with something like surprise. Most humans flee. Most hide. Few see me and do not tremble. I don't have a choice, Malcolm said. Carrot survives or it doesn't. You're strong, yes, but your enemies, they don't fight fair. We'll need more than strength. Theryx's eyes narrowed. Explain. Malcolm moved toward the console. He pulled up a display of the northern cliffs and the surrounding orbit points. His fingers moved rapidly over controls, connecting patched circuits and hacked signals. The faction that hunted you, satellites, drones, orbital weapons, they'll target the city next. Carrot has no shields left, no backup. But we can improvise. We can trick them, disable them temporarily and buy time. I'll need your help to survive long enough to make it work. The dragon leaned closer, wings folding slightly, scales brushing the walls. Clever. Adaptive. Your species may be small, but you have ingenuity. Malcolm felt a flicker of pride but didn't let it distract him. Time was short. He began gathering what he could. Scavenged drone cores, electromagnetic disruptors, fragments of old plasma weaponry. The small lab transformed into a workshop of desperate preparation, every piece repurposed for survival. Sparks flew, circuits hummed, and the dragon's deep presence vibrated through the floor with every careful movement. You move fast, Theryx said in thought. I underestimated you. Most humans would break under pressure. I've broken before, Malcolm replied. I've survived worse. Carrot doesn't get a second chance. Neither do we. Hours passed as they worked, the city around them silent and tense. Malcolm modified drones, rewired towers, and created makeshift energy nets. Theryx tested the lab for weaknesses, pointing out angles where an enemy could strike. Their communication was strange, thought and movement, instinct and plan, but it was effective. Human determination paired with dragon experience. As midnight approached, a faint hum vibrated in the canyon. Malcolm froze. Theryx stiffened, nostrils flaring. Shadows moved along the cliffs, scouts, probably drones sent ahead of the main fleet. Their sensors probed for weakness, looking for human settlements to exploit. Malcolm's pulse quickened. Every misstep now could destroy Carrot. He moved toward the window, adjusting the electromagnetic disruptors to focus on the approaching shadows. They'll come closer, he said. We'll need to blind them for just a few seconds, just enough. Theryx's wings flared slightly, filling the room with heat. Few humans can think like this under pressure. Most panic. Most die. Malcolm didn't panic. He felt fear, yes, it pressed against his chest, but he also felt something stronger, clarity. Survival depended on action, not hesitation. And humans, he reminded himself, survived because we dared. A sudden tremor shook the building as one of the distant drones tested the city's weak barriers. Malcolm's hand darted to a control lever, redirecting energy through a plasma conduit. Sparks arced, lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, everything seemed ready to explode. Then silence. The drones hovered, confused as their systems flickered and failed. Theryx exhaled, a low rumble of approval. You are resourceful. You may be small, but your courage exceeds many larger creatures. Malcolm allowed himself a brief nod. But he didn't relax. The scouts were only the beginning. The main fleet would arrive, stronger, faster, more lethal. And Carrot was still exposed. From the darkness beyond the cliffs, a sound echoed, low, deep, metallic. Not the wind. Not the storm. Something larger approaching. Malcolm turned to Theryx. The dragon's eyes reflected the faint starlight, wary and calculating. They're coming, Malcolm said quietly, tightening his fists. We have to be ready. Every second counts. Theryx lowered his massive head, scales brushing Malcolm's shoulder. Then we begin. Together. Malcolm swallowed. One human, one exiled dragon king. Against an unknown army. The odds were impossible. Yet he felt a spark of certainty. This night would test them both. And when the time came, humans would prove what they always had. That courage, intelligence, and determination could defy even the impossible. And from the cliffs above, shadows shifted again, moving closer, waiting for the moment to strike. The shadows on the northern cliffs shifted like restless predators. Malcolm pressed himself against the wall of the lab, eyes tracking every flicker of movement outside. The scouts were gone, or disabled, but their arrival had confirmed it. The main force was close, faster and larger than he had feared. His pulse pounded. Carrot's defenses were fragile. Every tower, every barricade, every piece of repurposed tech counted, and one misstep could destroy them all. Theryx crouched beside him, wings folded tight, scales glinting in the flickering light. Your mind is fast, human. Few can calculate so much under pressure. Malcolm swallowed, keeping his voice low. We don't have time to test it fully. The energy nets will only hold them for seconds. I have to place them precisely or the city dies. The dragon's eyes glimmered with something like understanding. Then we place them together. I will guide you. Malcolm nodded. They moved as one, human and dragon, weaving through the cramped lab and onto the rooftop. The canyon wind bit at his face, whipping dust and grit into his eyes, but he ignored it. His hands moved with precision, activating drones and focusing the electromagnetic nets toward the canyon floor. Every circuit, every conduit, every wire had been adjusted for this moment. Failure was not an option. From the darkness, the enemy appeared, sleek war drones, orbiting with metallic hums, cutting across the canyon like silver fish. Malcolm's stomach clenched. Their sensors glowed faint red, scanning for energy sources, life weaknesses. One miscalculation, and the entire city would be reduced to rubble before anyone even understood what had happened. Now, Malcolm whispered and flipped a switch. The energy net sparked to life. Lightning-like arcs danced between the towers, forming a jagged barrier across the canyon. The drones screamed as their circuits overloaded, shields flickering, systems crashing. Sparks flew in the night, bouncing off the metal walls, painting the city in violent white flashes. Malcolm barely breathed, his eyes tracking every unit. Theryx's wings unfurled, lifting him off the rooftop. His shadow blotted out the dim starlight as he dove, flames streaking from his maw, targeting drones that had survived the nets. Each strike was calculated, precise, not wasteful, not careless. Malcolm felt the tremor of his power through the rooftop, the raw force of a being older than the city itself. But it wasn't over. One drone, faster and larger than the rest, broke through the net's edge. Its targeting sensors locked onto Malcolm. He ran, diving behind the main console, heart hammering. Sparks flew as the drone fired a pulse beam. He slammed his hand on a plasma conduit, redirecting the energy just in time. The drone shuddered, systems misfiring, and crashed into the canyon wall. Theryx landed beside him, breathing heavily, wings slick with friction burns. You calculate faster than any human I have seen in centuries. Most dragons would panic at that speed. Malcolm wiped sweat from his brow, not letting himself smile. No time for compliments. They'll regroup. And he was right. From the shadows of the canyon, more units appeared. Sleek warships, low and fast, scanning for Carrod's energy sources. Each carried more firepower than the human city had ever seen. Malcolm's stomach twisted. The city couldn't survive a direct assault. Not physically. Not structurally. Not without a miracle. He turned to Theryx. We have to improvise. Full attack is suicide. I need a distraction. The dragon cocked his head. I can make them focus on me, but you must act quickly. Humans, your species thrives on risk. I can see why. Malcolm's hands flew across the console, rerouting power, opening backup circuits, connecting drones in a pattern he hadn't fully tested. If it worked, it would create a localized zero-gravity zone along the canyon floor, enough to toss enemy drones off balance and give Carrot a window to react. If it failed, everything would collapse. The first warship entered the canyon. Malcolm held his breath and activated the field. Sparks crackled violently. The gravity nets pulsed. The drone engines whined and shrieked as their trajectories skewed. One by one they collided with canyon walls, crashing with deafening metallic screams. Malcolm's ears rang, but he forced himself to focus. Theryx roared, diving among the remaining units, flames streaking through the dark, forcing the enemies to split focus. Every move he made, Malcolm adjusted the field, guiding drones and ships like pieces on a cosmic chessboard. Hours, or maybe minutes, later the last drone fell. Silence returned to the canyon, broken only by the wind and the faint hum of the disrupted energy nets. Malcolm's chest heaved. He slumped against the console, exhausted but alive. Carrot still stood. Theryx landed beside him, wings folding carefully. You have done what few could imagine. I underestimated your species. Humans, you are more than I believed. Malcolm nodded, rubbing his temples. We survived this round. But it's not over. The main fleet will arrive soon. And they won't be so careless. The dragon's eyes scanned the horizon, dark and thoughtful. Then we prepare. Together we adapt. Together we survive. Malcolm looked down at the city below, fragile and flickering under the dim starlight. He felt a surge of determination. Every human in Carrot depended on him now. Failure was not an option. And even against impossible odds, humans had survived worse. From the distant cliffs came a low rumble, almost mechanical. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. Something larger, stronger, and faster than any drone was moving. His stomach tightened. This wasn't a scout. This was the first wave of the real threat. He glanced at Theryx. The dragon's gaze met his, sharp and unwavering. Are you ready? Malcolm took a deep breath. I was born ready. The night held its breath with them. And in the darkness beyond the canyon, shapes moved, hundreds of them, silent, lethal and coming closer. The fight for Carrot had only just begun. The rumble from the northern cliffs grew louder, vibrating through the canyon walls. Malcolm crouched behind the console, heart hammering. The main fleet had arrived, sleek alien warships that moved like living metal. Their hulls glimmered faintly in the dim starlight, scanning for the city below. Every second they spent sizing up Carrot brought the city closer to destruction. Theryx unfurled his massive wings, the scales on his back reflecting flashes of the stormlit sky. We have only one chance, the dragon's mind pressed against Malcolm's. One calculated strike. I will draw their fire, you must guide it. Malcolm swallowed. He had been preparing for this, modifying drones, connecting energy nets, improvising systems that should never have worked. But the stakes were higher than ever. If he failed, Carrot would burn. The humans would die. And yet, the impossible felt achievable. That was the human way. He tapped into the main console, rerouting power through the city's old orbital launcher. Normally used for cargo shuttles, it could now become a makeshift kinetic bombardment system. He calculated trajectories in his head, adjusting for wind, canyon walls, and the movement of the enemy fleet. Every second, every tiny miscalculation could cause catastrophe. They'll fire when we act, Malcolm said, voice low. I can't hold them off forever. We have to force their hand. Theryx's eyes burned with resolve. Then we force it together. The first warship fired, beams slicing the night sky. The energy net sparked violently but could not hold. Malcolm redirected the remaining drones into a precise formation, creating a corridor of chaos for Theryx to maneuver through. The dragon dove, weaving through the beams, breathing plasma fire that forced enemy ships apart. Sparks and streaks of molten energy illuminated the canyon like lightning. Malcolm's fingers flew over the controls, eyes scanning multiple readouts. He activated the orbital launcher. The heavy payload shot into the sky, guided by a network of improvised drones and electromagnetic pulses. The projectiles weren't powerful enough to destroy a ship outright, but they could redirect momentum, create collisions, and sow chaos. The calculations were risky, but the human mind thrived on risk. Theryx roared, diving again, forcing enemy sensors to focus on him. Now! Malcolm shouted to himself, although the dragon felt the command in thought. He adjusted the launcher's final pulse, and the payload hit the first alien vessel. The impact threw it into the canyon wall, engines exploding in fire and metal. Sparks and shrapnel rained down on the city. One ship remained, larger than the others, its sensors locked onto Carrad's core energy grid. Malcolm's pulse quickened. The city couldn't withstand a direct hit. He knew he had to take a personal risk. "I have to guide it manually," he muttered. Therix's presence pressed against him, a silent warning. If you fail, the city dies. If you succeed, humanity survives. Malcolm took a deep breath, overriding safety protocols. Every calculation, every step of the orbital launch ran through his mind in a blur. The ship fired, and he rerouted its beam mid-flight using the drones, creating a cascade of feedback that threw the vessel off course. The alien ship collided with its own fleet, sparks and fire exploding across the night sky. The canyon shook. Carrad trembled under the impact. Malcolm's ears rang, sweat stung his eyes, and for a heartbeat he feared the city might crumble. But when the dust cleared, the enemy fleet was scattered, damaged and retreating. Carrad still stood. The humans inside the city, still huddled and terrified, glimpsed the silhouettes of alien ships fleeing beyond the cliffs. Therix landed beside Malcolm, wings folding slowly, scales shimmering with heat. "You have done what none of us thought possible. Few humans could calculate, act, and survive this. But have turned the tide." Malcolm slumped, exhaustion and relief washing over him. His hands were scorched, his muscles trembling, but his mind burned with triumph. We did it," he said, barely believing the words. "Carrad survives." The dragon lowered his massive head. "Not because of me. Because of you. Your species excels where others fail. You adapt. You endure. You fight when all hope seems lost." Malcolm swallowed hard. "It wasn't just me. We worked together. We had to. And Carrad, people needed us. I just did what humans do." Therix's eyes softened, a flicker of ancient understanding in them. "You are small. You are fragile. And yet, your courage surpasses what many larger beings dare attempt. Humans, perhaps you were always meant for more than this world." Outside, the storm clouds above the cliffs began to dissipate, revealing distant stars and the faint glow of the twin suns still below the horizon. The city's lights flickered weakly but steadily. For the first time in decades, Carrad felt safe. Malcolm sank to his knees, breathing heavily, watching Therix fold his wings and gaze toward the cliffs where the enemy had disappeared. "They'll be back," Malcolm said quietly, more to himself than the dragon. "Perhaps," Therix replied in thought. "But now you know what humans are capable of. Now you know that courage, intellect, and determination, your species' greatest weapons, can defy even impossible odds." Malcolm nodded, a faint smile forming. He knew the night was far from over. The fleet would regroup. The enemies would come again. But one thing had changed: humanity had shown its strength. One human with intelligence, courage, and resolve had altered the course of a battle that no one expected them to win. The canyon was quiet now, save for the hum of repaired circuits and the gentle rumble of Therix's breathing. Malcolm looked at the dragon, exhaustion mixing with awe. This night, he thought, this is only the beginning. And somewhere beyond the cliffs, shadows shifted. The war had not ended. But Carrad had survived the impossible. And Malcolm knew with a clarity that burned in his chest that humans could survive anything, if they dared. The first light of Terran 9's twin suns crept over the canyon rim, painting the jagged cliffs in pale gold. Carrad lay quiet beneath the glow, battered but standing. The city smelled of burnt metal and ozone from the battle, and yet there was life in the streets, humans emerging cautiously, blinking against the new sunlight. They had survived. Against odds that should have crushed them, Carrad had survived. Malcolm sat on the edge of the rooftop, legs dangling over the side, fingers brushing the scorched metal. Exhaustion weighed on him like gravity, but relief coursed through his veins. Every moment of fear, every spark of adrenaline, every calculated risk, it had led to this. And yet there was more than relief. There was awe. He glanced at the massive shadow beside him. Therix, the dethroned Dragon King, folded his wings carefully, each movement deliberate, powerful, and impossibly graceful. The scars of battle ran across his scales, remnants of fights Malcolm could barely comprehend. But there was no menace now. Only respect and something that felt almost like trust. "You have done what few creatures, human or dragon, could imagine," Therix said in thought, the weight of centuries behind it. "You acted with courage, intelligence, and resolve. You proved your species' worth." Malcolm's chest swelled. He wanted to argue, to claim it was luck, that the city had survived by chance. But he knew better. Humans survived because they acted, because they dared, because they refused to yield to impossible odds. That night, they had turned despair into action and action into victory. We survived, Malcolm said aloud, though Therix did not need to hear it in words. We did what we had to. The city, people, they're alive because we didn't give up. And yet, Therix pressed gently in thought, it was more than survival. You saw opportunity where others would have fled. You acted when others would have frozen. That is what makes your species exceptional. Malcolm looked down at the streets. Families peered from windows, children clutched pets, elders leaned on canes, all witnessing a city that had faced annihilation and lived. Carrot would not forget this night. His people would speak of it for generations, the story of one human who refused to bow, who welcomed a being larger, older, and infinitely more powerful than himself, and changed the course of fate. Will you stay? Malcolm asked softly. Therix's massive head tilted, eyes scanning the horizon where remnants of the enemy fleet retreated into the storms beyond the cliffs. I must return to claim what was lost, to rebuild what has been destroyed. But your hand opened the door. You acted where others would have feared. For that, you have my gratitude, human. Malcolm swallowed, the weight of responsibility heavy on him. He realized then that opening the door had been more than a single act of courage. It had been a choice, one that had reshaped destiny, that had tested every ounce of his intelligence, determination, and morality. That small decision had saved thousands and perhaps more. The night you opened the door. Therix's thought pressed against his mind, gentle yet immense, was a night the universe will remember. Humanity is not weak. Humanity survives. Humanity endures. A quiet breeze stirred, carrying the faint smell of ozone and scorched metal. Malcolm felt it on his skin, a reminder of the fragility of Carrot, and of the strength required to protect it. He flexed his fingers, imagining every small act, the redirection of drones, the improvised energy nets, the risky adjustments to the orbital launcher, all tiny threads woven together into the fabric of survival. People will remember, Malcolm whispered. They'll tell the story. They'll know we fought back. Perhaps, Therix replied, and perhaps they will also remember you, not just as a survivor but as a symbol of what humans can do when the impossible looms. You are a bridge between worlds. Malcolm laughed softly, a sound raw with fatigue but rich with relief. He thought of all the nights spent repairing broken circuits, all the moments when hope had seemed foolish, all the times he had risked his life simply because survival demanded it. And now, standing beside a dragon who had ruled galaxies, he realized something profound. Humans were never meant to cower. Humans were meant to act, to adapt, to rise, even when the odds were impossible. Below, life in Carrot stirred. Children ran through the streets, their laughter shaky but real. Merchants opened shutters, inspecting stores that had survived the chaos. The city's hum returned, fragile but defiant. Malcolm felt a surge of pride not just for himself, but for every human in Carrot, for the species that had endured, and for the lives saved because one human had chosen courage over fear. Therix flexed his wings, readying for departure. The door you opened, he said, thought heavy with respect, was not just for me. It was for humanity. You have proven that even in the shadow of impossible power, humans can rise. Remember this and teach it. Others will follow where you have led. Malcolm nodded, exhausted but certain. I'll remember, he said aloud. And I'll make sure they remember too. The dragon lifted into the sky, wings catching the first light of the twin suns. He paused, casting a long shadow over the city, eyes meeting Malcolm's one last time. Farewell, human. You have earned this night. As Therix disappeared beyond the cliffs, Malcolm stood alone on the rooftop. The city of Carrot stretched below him, battered, scarred, yet unbroken. He felt the weight of what had been accomplished, the lives saved, the impossible odds overcome, the courage that had carried them through darkness. For a long moment he simply watched, breathing in the quiet strength of survival. And then he smiled, faint but true, knowing something powerful and unshakable. Humans endure. Humans fight. Humans, when they dare, can rise to meet any challenge, no matter how vast, no matter how terrifying. That night, Carrot had been saved. And humanity, through the courage of one human and the trust he gave, had shone brighter than the twin suns of Terran 9. The war might return. Threats might come again. But the story of this night, the night the dethroned Dragon King knocked and a human opened the door like it was always meant to, would live forever.